The review on Hydra Stomper is overall, he's a good card. Last week, it became very obvious once my video released how wrong I was going to be. There were a bunch of people telling me exactly how, and I agreed with them. So when I give bad takes, let me know. And I ended up changing the video title before the card came out because I knew the card was going to be actually better than I was anticipating. There were also new Series 4 cards that released, a bunch of new move cards, which also helped Hydra Stomper. And he just works better than I anticipated in more normal move decks, move bounce, with Heimdall. So overall, if you like move, this is a decent card worth having. I myself will not be picking up this card. Right now, I like how my move decks operate. There was somebody who, on a pretty old video at this point, chimed in. There was a move deck I have. I have the thumbnail displayed right now. And really, when I created that deck, I created it with 11 cards. Now, we all know that's impossible. You have to add a 12th card. So I just threw in Nico. But they properly assessed that Nico was the 12th card in that deck and asked about Hydra Stomper, and I said that makes perfect sense. So the cool thing about my decks, if I can toot my own horn, is that a fair amount of them are very usable, even going back months. They're still usable to today. And as new cards come out, you can slot in some of these new cards depending on that specific deck and just continue to elevate those decks. So just be aware of that as well. But all that said, at some point I'll end up getting Hydra Stomper probably, but today is not that day. Now, Surge is a super interesting card, one of the more interesting cards of recent memory, because it's a daisy chain effect. So -1 cost is just valuable. +1 power is a nice bonus, because with Loki you don't get that, but also there's this condition where you have to play the card to get the ability to repeat. So the deck building is just going to be very fascinating. I had a interesting time at doing my theory crafted decks, and we'll just progress into those. With Surge, I think the optimal path is just going to be having lower cost cards in general. That way you can play them out the turn you draw them and keep stacking that bonus. Of course, Surge later in the game she plays, she has less of an effect, but it's still a decent effect. You're getting +1 power and -1 cost, so you can fit other cards into your curve. Here, I'm throwing her into a Zoo deck, but also I have Storm to lock off locations, and Vision as well, which is a movable piece in case you need more power into the Storm lane. Sunspot can help with that as well, along with Nightcrawler and Squirrel Girl. And let's get to the Series 3 version. So with Series 3, boy, these are getting wacky. Just hold on, wait for these other wackier decks. I'm going with a Bast route primarily. If you have Agent Venom, that makes sense in this deck as well. With Surge, with Bast and Mysterio, the clones are powered to 3. The main Mysterio is also 3, but that's fine because the clones actually have power. You see Martyr in here because you can probably stop her from moving. With the Mr. Sinister and Mysterio, you just have a lot of cards down. Iron Man and Mystique is a fantastic combo. You have Cosmo to do some level of protection if you play your Havoc or your Iron Man. This deck can also kind of play out the cards that you draw, but that is also the big question in my mind. How effective is Surge going to be depending on your deck building and being able to play out her cards when you draw her and all of that stuff? So I really would need to get my hands on it to see exactly how good this version would be. So I mentioned Agent Venom, and we're just continuing to build on the Series 3 version. Here we have fantastic cards like Sage, Phastos. Can I say Phastos is a fantastic card? But you can build on to the Surge bonuses with Phastos. We have Iron Man to provide just some unexpected power. Not Iron Man, Iron Patriot to provide some unexpected power. You see, we have, this is essentially a 3 cost and below deck. We have Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Athena, because You're going to be able to play 2 cards quite a bit. Ravonna to do some discounting on our Havoc, Thena, Sage, and maybe an Iron Patriot card that gets generated. So this is definitely a version. I'm a huge Agent Venom fan. This is a version I would love to be able to try out. I put this one together knowing full well it's not a good deck.
Trash.
That's why I'm calling it high concept. It really just combines a bunch of ideas I had in my head, and I would just have to tinker around and see which ones bubble to the top. So the idea started with Loki and Surge, because if I can get Surge down onto the board with Loki, now those are some heavy discounts. If it all works as I expect, it's high concept. This might fall apart because it just doesn't work with the assumptions I have. But as long as you play down Surge, I would think that playing down one of the cards that you now have drawn into, potentially you play Loki first, then Surge because you have them both in your hand, and now Surge is discounting that Loki card. You have Quinjet to do that as well, Adam Warlock to draw through more of your cards. I went back and forth on whether or not to add Adam Warlock into my Surge decks, because he's going to draw a card essentially, or make you draw a card that doesn't have Surge's discount. So you would play down potentially a Surge card, Adam Warlock would draw that Surge card, and then you would normally draw your normal costed card. So there's some anti-synergy probably there, but Adam Warlock also is fantastic with Loki. So I'm throwing it in there, just see what would work. Iron Patriot, we all know what good he is. Copycat, Luna Snow for extra energy, that's fantastic, especially if you're discounting these cards with Surge. Sunspot with Surge because you may be floating some energy from time to time just because of Surge's discount. Shang-Chi is just my boy, he had to make one of these decks. Good tech. And Symbiote Spider-Man I wanted to call out as well, because him being able to duplicate effects, let's say a copycat effect that's fantastic, a Luna Snow maybe, a Iron Patriot, or even Surge. So that would probably happen later in the game, of course. Symbiote Spider-Man is a 4-cost card unless he's being discounted with Surge. But this specific deck, while I acknowledge is probably far from good, is oftentimes where I start with deck building with what I think are bad decks. I take them into matches, see what's working, see what's not, and just make decisions from there. But yeah, I would just have to see how games play out. So Nerd Dynamite has called this card interesting. That usually means he's gonna get it, or was I misleading you? I was not misleading you. I will definitely be getting Surge. I will be using tokens. There are no more Spotlight keys. I will not be using packs because those are packed with
trash.
So I will be using tokens to get Surge, and I will be trying to bring maybe 2 different decks. If I can be unique enough in this space, there will of course be other people creating pretty unique Surge decks. I've said unique quite a bit, and that jogged my memory. With Surge, there will be decks with Surge that you cannot play. You cannot substitute Surge out. You can't. So if you want to be able to play Surge decks, you have to have her. Her decks are going to be highly unique, that if you don't have Surge, you just won't be able to play the deck. There is no substitution. So keep that in mind, because even if we get out of the first week, there of course will be opportunities with how the new economy and the new token store works for you to get her and not have to wait 6 months or a year. But she is that unique of a card where if you like Pixie, if you want to play a Pixie deck, you have to have Pixie or you just can't play it. So Surge is that same way, and keep that in mind whether you decide to pick up the card or pass on her. Thanks to all the members of the channel, and thank you to everybody that watches this deep into the videos. Should I start changing that up? So yeah, just let me know what you think, where my mind is at. This is a card that I actually like. It has been a while because last month was
trash.